In this video, I will discuss how to avoid plagiarism as you put together the final drafts of your research paper. Plagiarism is actually derived from a Latin word which means kidnapper, and it involves using another person's ideas, information, or expressions as your own. So you must always give credit when you are using someone else's ideas, information, or expressions. It's not just, for example, using a direct quote. If you are using somebody else's idea and putting that idea into your own words, you still need to include citation information to give credit to the person or persons who came up with the idea in the first place. In our class, we use MLA, or Modern Language Association, which uses parenthetical citations and a works cited page to give credit to all borrowed ideas. So in addition to providing a specific format to organize your ideas, MLA also provides a way for you to cite your work and then provide more specific information about where you found your sources in a works cited page. The most blatant form of plagiarism involves outright copying someone else's paper, which I have unfortunately seen over the years. However, more commonly, other forms of plagiarism include repeating or paraphrasing wording, taking a useful phrase, and paraphrasing an argument or presenting a line of thinking and not including where you got that information from. That is often an unintentional way someone actually commits plagiarism. So the point is, if you are using any idea that's not your own, you need to give credit to where you came up with that information. Here are some examples. These come from the MLA Handbook 8th edition, which is the most recent edition. You can read these examples. The first is the original example. The plagiarized example takes the exact same ideas, puts them in slightly different wording, but doesn't give any indication that these ideas were found someplace else. It appears as though the person who wrote this passage actually came up with this idea. In the acceptable usage passage, you can see that there's a frame, as Wendy Martin has suggested, and then the idea is presented. And then in parentheses, the page number where this idea was presented in the source is also included. We did previously in the semester go over how to frame and include in-text citations for quotes and paraphrases. So some of this is just a little bit of a review, but in regards to plagiarism, it's really important that you be sure to give credit to all of the ideas and the words that you use from other sources, especially in a research paper because you're using so many more sources than you have in previous assignments. Here's another example. And in this example, you can see in the plagiarized version, there is no acknowledgement that this information came from another source. In the acceptable usage passage, in parentheses, we have the number 60, which indicates that this came from a source, and we also have an author's name. So credit is given to the author, and it's not plagiarized in this case. Here is another example, paraphrasing an argument or presenting a line of thinking. So this is an example of that. In this long passage, the idea of 3 different waves is presented in this example about the industrial civilization. The plagiarized version includes this idea of the different waves of the agricultural revolution, but does not give any credit to where this comes from. In the acceptable usage passage, the author's name is added, and then we have a page reference. In some of your sources, you may not have page references. For example, if it's an online source, that's okay as long as you include the author's name. And remember, if you were to not include the author's name in your frame for the paraphrase or the quote, the author's last name would go down in the parentheses before the page reference or number. When do you actually not need documentation? Information and ideas that are considered broadly known by your readers and widely accepted by scholars, generally you do not have to include source information for the type of information or ideas. Some examples include basic biography of an author or the dates of an historical event. For example, if you write the date Pearl Harbor was bombed, people know that, people accept that, you don't need to have a source to verify that. Different proverbs, sayings, and cliches also often don't require, if they're very, very common, don't require documentation. However, if you are in any doubt at all, cite your source. It's always better to err on the side of caution and include a citation than not. Some other related issues to plagiarism. Reusing a research paper. Don't do this. If you have written a paper in another class, or maybe when you were in high school, don't reuse it for another course. That is actually considered a form of plagiarism. If you want to take the same idea, work with that idea, take some examples from what you previously did from another paper, you need to first ask your professor if that's okay and have that conversation. Don't just assume it's okay to reuse work that you completed in another course or in another school. Collaborative work. So if you created a piece of writing with other people, you need to be sure that you give credit to all the people involved, everyone who contributed to the paper. And then copyright infringement. Please note that you need to be careful with this. With social media, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, it's easy to just pull pictures and things like that right off the internet and paste them into your work. But you have to include sources for this type of information. The pictures that I'm using in this presentation are copyright free. If you use copyright free images, you don't have to include citation information if none is available. If, however, the image is copyright free, but there is an author attributed to it or a publication date, you have to include that. If there's no information and it's in a site that says copyright free, then that's really the only case where you don't have to include any documentation for those images. To review, if you're not sure if you've plagiarized, think about these different considerations. If you take notes and you don't distinguish your summary and paraphrase from quotation, and then you present that wording from the notes as if it were your own, that's an example of plagiarism. While browsing the web, you copy text and you paste it into your paper, and you don't use quotation marks, you don't cite the source. Even if you change the words a little bit, you still have to include the source information. If you don't do that, then that's considered plagiarism. If you repeat or paraphrase someone's wording without acknowledgement, if you take someone's unique or particularly useful phrase without acknowledgement, and if you paraphrase someone's argument or present someone's line of thought without acknowledgement, those are all examples of paraphrasing or plagiarism. And if this one is pretty obvious, buy or are given a research paper, some from somebody else and you use parts or all of that and you pass it off as your own, that of course is definitely considered plagiarism, which is ultimately considered cheating. You can avoid plagiarism by making a list of the writers and viewpoints you've discovered in your research and using this list to double check the presentation of material in your paper. And by keeping the following 3 categories distinct in your notes: your own ideas, your summaries of others' material, and exact wording that you've copied. So if you're copying anything, just go ahead and stick quotation marks around it immediately. Write the author, write the source, write the page number if that applies, to protect yourself later from possibly committing plagiarism. Also, identify sources of all material that you borrow. And again, be careful if you're using exact wording, you have to use quotation marks. But even if it's a paraphrase of an idea or an argument, you still have to include source information. And if you're uncertain about any of your sources, how to cite anything, please ask me. I am very happy to help you. I have the MLA Handbook 8th edition sitting on my desk. I can look things up for you easily. So please don't hesitate if you have any questions. I don't expect you to have all of the citation information memorized, how to format and put together that information. So I really am happy to help if you have any questions or you need any help with your sources. And that concludes this presentation. Thank you.